When we discuss the firepower that the United States brought to bear in Vietnam, the discussion tends to gravitate toward the strategic assets, the B-52 arc light strikes, the naval gunfire from the 7th Fleet, the close air support from tactical fighters. These systems delivered explosive power on a scale that was genuinely awesome, but the weapon that arguably had the most direct impact on the daily survival of the average infantryman was something far less glamorous: the 105mm Howitzer, and not just any 105, but a specific variant designed for a war that the Army's existing arsenal was not equipped to fight. By 1969, over 400 M102s were operating in Vietnam. The story of its adoption reveals a military reluctantly learning that weight, mobility, and survivability could be just as important as explosive yield. The artillerymen who had spent their careers with the old M101 did not want this new gun. When the first M102s arrived in Vietnam in March 1966, issued to the 1st Battalion, 21st Field Artillery, they were met with skepticism from the men who would have to use them. The M101A1, the standard 105mm howitzer since World War II, was a known quantity. It was reliable, its waist-high breech made loading relatively easy, and a generation of artillerymen had grown up with its quirks and characteristics. The new M102, by contrast, was different in almost every respect. It was built from welded aluminum instead of steel, which brought the weight down from roughly 5,000 pounds to just under 3,300 pounds. But that weight savings came with trade-offs. The gun sat lower to the ground, which meant the breech was closer to the dirt, making the loading process more physically demanding for the crew. The trails were a wishbone-shaped aluminum box, not the heavy steel legs of the M101, and the gun had no protective shield for the crew. To experienced gunners, it looked fragile. They argued that the M101 was still superior. It was cheaper, easier to load, and had higher ground clearance when being towed through rough terrain. Their concerns were not unreasonable, but they were missing the point. The war had changed, and the old ways of moving and emplacing artillery no longer applied. The decisive advantage of the M102 was not its range, but its ability to be where the enemy did not expect it. The central problem of artillery in Vietnam was not a lack of firepower, it was a lack of access. The terrain was a nightmare of dense jungle, rice paddies and swampy lowlands. The climate was defined by heat and relentless rainfall, with some regions receiving over 100 inches of rain annually. Moving a 5-ton M101 through this environment was a major logistical undertaking, often requiring the same heavy trucks that got stuck in the mud or could not navigate the narrow trails. The M102, however, was designed for what the Army was just beginning to understand as air mobility. Its reduced weight meant it could be slung beneath a CH-47 Chinook helicopter and moved to a firebase that was completely inaccessible by ground. A 3/4-ton truck could tow it, rather than the 2.5-ton truck required for the M101, which meant smaller vehicles could support forward positions. When the gun was lifted into a clearing, the crew could have it emplaced and firing in minutes, and once it was firing, the M102 offered a critical survivability feature that the M101 could not match: 360-degree traverse. The M101 required its trails to be shifted if the guns needed to turn beyond a limited arc. The M102 sat on a circular firing platform. With the wheels raised off the ground, the entire gun could be rotated to engage threats from any direction without repositioning. In a war where firebases were often hit from multiple sides during a sapper attack, that capability saved lives. The low silhouette also made the gun harder to spot and harder to hit with counter-battery fire. It was not a better gun in the abstract sense. It was a better gun for this specific war. The limits of lightweight required its own engineering solutions. The M102's lightweight solved one set of problems, but it introduced another. A howitzer that weighs less than 3,300 pounds is inherently less stable when firing than a heavier gun. The recoil forces, unless managed carefully, will cause the weapon to shift, jump, or tip, especially in the soft, wet ground that characterized so much of Vietnam. The design addressed this through a combination of features. The wishbone trail, in addition to being lightweight, helped manage the center of gravity and prevent the gun from jumping out of position. The circular firing platform, once staked down, provided a stable base that distributed the recoil forces. But in the swampy delta regions, even this was not always sufficient. The ground was simply too soft to provide a stable firing platform. The solution was the XM6 artillery firing platform, essentially a large aluminum mat that could be slung by helicopter and placed over inundated ground or small ponds. The M102 would then be positioned on this platform, along with its crew and up to 30 rounds of ammunition. The combination of the 3,000-pound howitzer and the 8,000-pound platform created a stable firing position in terrain that would have been completely impassable for conventional artillery. The system worked well enough that 38 platforms were produced and deployed by the end of 1968. It was a recognition that in this environment, the ground itself was an enemy, and overcoming it required as much engineering as overcoming the opposing forces. The M102 also found a second life that its designers never anticipated. The M102's influence extended beyond the ground war. In the later stages of the Vietnam conflict, the Air Force was looking for ways to increase the firepower of its AC-130 gunships. The 40mm Bofors guns were effective, but against hardened targets or concentrated forces, something heavier was needed. The solution was to take the M102's cannon, specifically the M137 tube and M37 recoil mechanism, and mount it in the left side of the aircraft, firing out the door. This was not a simple modification. Firing a 105mm round from an aircraft imposes stresses that a ground carriage never experiences. But the basic mechanism proved adaptable enough to make the transition. The AC-130's 105mm gun became one of the most feared weapons in the close air support arsenal, capable of delivering precision fire in situations where bombs or rockets would cause unacceptable collateral damage. The same cannon that was designed to be slung under a Chinook into a jungle clearing was now engaging targets from 10,000 feet, guided by sensors that the original designers could not have imagined. The M102 demonstrates that firepower is not just about what the shell does when it lands, but about how the gun gets to the fight. The M102 remained in service for decades, seeing action in Grenada, the Gulf War, and even as late as 2004 in Iraq with National Guard units. It was eventually replaced by the M119, a British design adapted for American use, which offered even lighter weight and improved performance. But the M102's legacy is not measured solely in years of service or number of rounds fired. What the M102 represents is a shift in thinking about what artillery support actually means in a counterinsurgency environment. The M101 was a fine weapon for a conventional war, where roads existed, front lines were defined, and guns could be positioned behind the main line of resistance. In Vietnam, none of those conditions held. The enemy was everywhere, and nowhere. Fire bases were isolated. Roads were ambush zones. The ability to move a gun by air, emplace it quickly, and provide immediate fire support to infantry in contact was more valuable than any incremental increase in range or payload. The M102 was not the most powerful artillery piece in Vietnam. That distinction belonged to the 175mm guns and 8-inch howitzers, but it was the most responsive, and for the men on the ground, responsiveness mattered more than raw power. A round on target in 3 minutes is worth more than a round on target in 30. The small firepower of the M102 reminds us that military effectiveness is not a simple function of explosive weight, it is a function of suitability, matching the tool to the environment, the threat, and the operational concept. The men who loaded and fired these guns in the jungle did so at a sustained rate of 3 rounds per minute, day and night, through monsoon rains and blistering heat. They did it because the gun could get there, and because getting there mattered more than anything else. If you value in-depth historical analysis that goes beyond surface-level summaries, subscribe to War Machine Air. And, if this examination of the M102 added to your understanding of how technology and tactics intersect, share this video with someone who needs to know that firepower comes in many forms.